on a Fence Post by James M. Morris. I wrote this story, which would be an embarrassment to my father, may he rest in peace, for two reasons. First, because its adolescent absurdity paints a funny picture, if I paint the picture vividly for you. And second, as a tribute to my father. It still makes me blush, too, but with a smile, decades after the breezy spring day of its occurrence at our farm at Deer Lake. Time has added perspective, understanding, and appreciation to a minor event etched into my memory that defines a bygone time and the special and meaningful relationship between my father and me. It was springtime during my freshman year in high school. We were getting ready to plant row crops on a remote tract of land called Deer Lake. It was so named because it had a playa-like lake, which occasionally filled with water and served as a watering place for white-tailed deer. It was remote from where we lived. Now, we lived on land near Afton, a community of some 65 souls located about 65 miles due east of Lubbock, Texas. It consisted of a school, general store, cotton gin, fuel supply business, blacksmith shop, 12 houses, and 4 churches, all of them within spitting distance of each other. Jesus apparently saw the need for the intervention of several churches to accommodate the exceptional quantity of sin generated in our community. I based that on the frequency and emotional intensity of the public confessions made by members of the Baptist church we attended, a required procedure for spiritual renewal that made attendance interesting and sometimes embarrassing. When Sister Ann verbally named her co-sinners out loud as she begged for forgiveness, I learned quickly that the co-sinners could be identified by their chins and red faces tucked solidly against their chest. Our land was in the rolling plains, which starts where the southeast part of the Great Plains ends. It is adjacent to a part of the Great Plains called the Caprock. The Caprock is a flat, mostly treeless landscape of fertile farmland or vast expanses of grassland for hundreds of miles west and north. In contrast, the rolling plains is an undulating terrain of predominantly native grassland, mesquite trees, shinry oak scrubs, cactus, sometimes called prickly pears, and yucca and sage plants. Mesquite trees and an occasional hackberry tree predominate the native rangeland around Afton. In the spring, the wind frequently blows from the west across the Caprock and its vast expanse of flat cultivated farmland, picking up and circulating dust that can be seen approaching our community as a dreadful black wall of darkness. We, in the rolling plains, are the unlucky benefactors of it. Deer Lake consisted of 640 acres, of which 160 acres was in cultivation. It was located about 20 miles east of Afton. Unlike the home place at Afton, Deer Lake has sandy to sandy loam soil, and the grassland is mostly shinry oak rather than mesquite. Its soil is prone to form a crust on its surface after spring rain, especially if it falls hard and fast. The crust facilitates wind erosion of the topsoil. We called it blowing. I was dispatched to Deer Lake that fateful day to run an implement over the land to prevent, or at least minimize, it from blowing. We call that implement a scratcher. Some places it is called a rotary hoe. All of this is technical, I know, real technical, but stay with me, please. My father graduated high school and reluctantly attended Texas A&M University for a while. Eager to join the war effort, he dropped out of college and joined the Army Air Corps and was accepted into pilot training program. Uncle Sam decided his dream of becoming a fighter pilot was subordinate to piloting heavy bombers. Following certification in the B-24, the war ended before he was shipped to California to train in the B-29. The discipline he learned in flight school never left him. He returned home to West Texas to resume his passion for farming and ranching. Dad was a hard worker whose work tempo was a trot. He studied farming and quickly developed farming skills that equaled or exceeded his skills as a pilot or as a fast-pitch softball player in the Army Air Corps. He had an uncanny sense of direction, especially from the cockpit of an airplane. He could lay off perfect rows on a terraced farmland with a four-bottom lister that could be knifed or cultivated without regard to increments of 4. He had large, gnarly hands, powerful forearms, and broad shoulders. He said what he meant and meant what he said. Most of all, he expected his help, my brother and me, to be fully engaged in the task at hand. That bears repeating. He expected me to be fully engaged in the task at hand. That presented a problem for me. At that age, I was absorbed with myself, girls, and sports. While I liked working with livestock, farming was bore. My mind flittered like a light bulb with a short circuit between what I was supposed to do and what I wanted to do. To say that I was not always fully engaged in the farming activities was an understatement. And sometimes I thought I knew a better way of doing things than Dad did. That did not go over well. As time passed, I realized that my failure to fully engage was the real problem. Dad expected me to think. Once I learned that lesson, it helped me graduate from college, law school, raise a family, and have a successful legal career. The older I got, the wiser he became. But back then, I dressed consistent with my unengaged attitude. On this day, I had on my usual attire: cross-country shoes without spikes, cut-off Levi shorts, an Army olive tactical cap, and no shirt. My exposed skin, which was most of my body, was a uniform medium dark brown. I drove to Deer Lake, fired up the Massey Ferguson 65, and hooked the tongue of the implement, the scratcher, onto the drawbar of the tractor. The tongue was attached to a metal frame that extended the entire length of the implement. The scratcher implement extended some 15 feet beyond the big tires on both sides of the tractor. Within the metal frame of the implement were several 2-inch pipes, each about 6 feet long, with metal barbs or spikes 6 to 8 inches long, welded to them vertically on all sides of the pipes. The pipes with spikes rotated as the implement was dragged over the soil, disrupting the crust of the soil. That process busted the crust, which reduced the propensity of the soil to blow. I was aware there was a barbed wire fence along the south side of the field. It was constructed of cedar or bodark posts securely buried in the ground. I also knew that running the scratcher was super easy except for 2 things. First, you could not turn the implement sharply without risk of the rear tire of the tractor colliding with the frame of the scratcher and lifting it up, potentially high enough to fall onto the top of the tractor. Second, the scratcher extended way past the side of the tractor, which required you to give wide berth to any potential obstructions when executing a turn, particularly at the end of the field. I knew those things. I had done this many times before, and on this day I say with confidence that I was fully engaged. Unfortunately, I was fully engaged in daydreaming about belting out a popular radio song before a live audience of beautiful girls. Oh, how beautifully I could sing on the tractor. I did it all the time. I had a strong voice that could be heard over the roar of the tractor's engine and even the clankety-clank of the scratcher. If I didn't know all the words to a song, I just made them up. Sometimes I just made up entire songs and lyrics myself. Things were going splendidly, I thought. I was fully engrossed in my musical daydream in the middle of the field, far from the fence on the south end of the field. And as I bumped along in fifth gear at a rapid pace, as fast as the tractor would go, I noticed my father standing in the bed of the pickup at the northwest corner of the field, waving his hat frantically and jumping up and down. I could tell he was yelling, but I could not discern what he was saying. I stood up and waved back at him. He jumped into the pickup and darted quickly into the turning row, and reemerged in the bed of the truck again, waving his arms, and again jumping up and down and yelling something. I was glad I could not hear what he was saying, because he did not look happy. I again stood up and waved back at him. He immediately put both hands on his knees in what appeared to be an expression of disgust. I continued to wave, signaling that I was doing great. He stood back up and pointed towards the fence behind me. At that moment, I realized something was wrong. I could only hear the roar of the tractor's engine, but not the clankety-clank of the scratcher. I looked behind me and discovered what my father was trying to tell me. I was midway through the field without the scratcher. I had lost my implement. The only part of it left was the tongue, which was happily bouncing along behind me, alone and lonely. I stopped the tractor and strained to see one end of the scratcher lodged at an odd angle against a fence post where I had just turned around. I was pretty sure the rest of the implement was nearby. My daydream turned into a nightmare. How can anyone lose a 30-foot noisy scratcher and not know it? I just did it. Oh my. I dreaded driving back up field to retrieve my plow like a kid running after a grinder that has bounced between his legs. You must go get it, even though you know the only thing the audience sees is your butt chasing the ball. And I knew my father would be there soon. But driving back across the field, dragging the lonely 6 or 8 foot tongue of my implement behind the tractor was a million times worse than chasing after a baseball. But I did it. We did not have a portable welder, so we could not fix the problem properly in the field. That field needed scratching now, not tomorrow or the next day. Disgusted with myself, I knew the first thing I was about to hear from my father, because I had heard it before. It had to do with failing to be fully engaged, but said in more colorful language that dealt with where my head had been. He was right, I was wrong. As usual, Dad solved the problem promptly by using a chain to pull the scratcher. With his ingenuity, I finished the job. Why didn't I see and accept his wisdom then? It took time, but I did later clearly see and appreciate it. This incident was one of many invaluable lessons from my father that have helped me succeed in life. Later, I proved it to him, and I thanked him, and I used my knowledge and experience to help him through a difficult time. But looking at this incident now, from the perspective of an eagle soaring high above the earth, I see its humor, and I am proud to say I am my father's son. Thank you.